Council meeting, we continue to hold remote meetings while the governor's executive order continues to be in effect due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to remind our citizens they can submit questions for items on today's agenda, as we did in previous meetings. Public comments may also be submitted at this time, and they will be read at the appropriate time during this meeting. Comments will be accepted up to the conclusion of the vote of the item. Comments may be submitted through the City of El Cajon's website under Agendas and Minutes. Go to video streaming and you'll see a button and submit your comments. The meeting is called to order, and I will ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, when I call on your name, if you can please state that you are present. Mayor Wells.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councilmember Goebel.
Here.
Councilmember Kendrick.
Here.
And Councilmember McClellan. I see he stated he's here, but his microphone is muted.
We're going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and stand for a brief moment of silence afterwards. All right? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all. Thank you. Okay. The city clerk posted orders of adjournment of the May 26th, 2020 meeting and the agenda of the June 9th, 2020 meeting in accordance with state law, counseling, and housing authority policy. I'd like to once again remind the public to submit their comments early to make sure they are received on time and they can be read before the item is approved. We're at presentations. We have one presentation on today's agenda, a commendation for Deputy Director of Community Development, Building and Fire and Safety Official, Dan Paval. Is Dan here?
Hi, yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Dan.
Hi.
Cannot believe you're retiring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
33 years.
We're going to miss you.
Dan is so well liked by everybody in the community and has done such a great job. And Dan, we have a commendation for you. I'm going to read that if you don't mind. I can embarrass you for just a minute. Dan Paval has been ensuring the quality and safety of El Cajon's properties, businesses, and residences since he began with the city of El Cajon as an assistant building inspector in May of 1987. He advanced in various positions, including fire safety specialist, supervising building inspector, and eventually the building and fire safety official and fire marshal. And whereas Dan has overseen the renaissance of El Cajon by managing quality projects that have transformed El Cajon from new residential developments such as the Magnolia Trails and Park Row to commercial projects like the Hampton Inn, Mercedes-Benz. And whereas Dan is an advocate for the public health and safety in building construction and has served as president of the statewide California Building Officials Organization, president of the San Diego chapter of the International Code Council, and serving in numerous committees and commissions. And whereas Dan also believes in educating future building inspectors and was part of the adjunct teaching staff at Southwestern Community College, where he has taught for many, many years. Now, therefore, I, Bill Wells, Mayor of the City of El Cajon, together with the City Council, do hereby recommend and congratulate Dan Paval on a very successful career with the City of El Cajon. We wish Dan good health and much happiness in the years to come. Signed this 9th day of June 2020. Congratulations, Dan.
Oh, thank you very much. Tony just walked in and handed me this, so really got a surprised look on my face when he did. It's been my honor to serve the City of El Cajon. I have nothing but gratitude for the years of employment that the city has given me.
I can tell you personally that I can't remember how many times people have come up to the microphone and said that Dan has come out to their properties and personally helped them through a difficult situation, whether it be a death in the family an older person that couldn't take care of the property anymore, or just some challenging problem, that Dan helped them, walk them through it, and not just told them what to do, but really guided them through that and acted as an advocate on their behalf. And Dan, you can't ask for more than that from somebody in your position. So for me personally, thank you very much. I'm sure some of the other council members would like to say something.
And I appreciate all of the under maintained properties that you brought forward to us, and let us help you get through the maze of getting them cleaned up and brought right back into compliance. And you've done a stellar job in doing that. I appreciate it. I hope your replacement will continue on that path and to bring forward these properties that need to be attended to, and let us encourage them through our efforts to bring them back into compliance. Thank you for all your help and your undying dedication to the city and keeping it beautiful.
Kerry?
Thank you.
Dan, I know that you didn't have an easy job, but you made the city look a lot better during your tenure. So thank you so much.
Amen.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to say anything?
Yeah, Dan, you've just done a great process, and at the same time, you've been very flexible in working with people, and I think you've struck the right balance in those two. So I appreciate your skill in that area.
Well, thank you very much. Like I say, I really thank the city of El Cajon. You know, it's because of my employment here that I've been able to raise a family, 3 wonderful children, and I've been able to, own a home. And, so none of that would have been possible without my employment with the city. So I'm very gracious for all the employment in the years I've worked here. It's been a wonderful experience.
All right, thank you very much, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Anybody else before we end? All right, Dan, thanks a lot. You sure have helped a lot of people, and we sure appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
All right, we're moving on to agenda changes. Staff, do you have any agenda changes?
Mr. Mayor, we have no changes recommended for the agenda.
How about council members?
No.
All right, then that brings us to consent items. Consent items are routine matters enacted by one motion. According to the recommendation listed below, with the concurrence of the city council, a council member or person in attendance may request discussion of a consent item at this time. Council members, do you wish to pull any of the consent items? Staff, how about you? All right, so
Yes,
nobody would like to make a motion to approve the consent items?
Second.
So before we do that, I just wanted to let you know we have no speaker cards for these. But first and second, and Mayor Wells, may I have your vote, please?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz?
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel?
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick?
Yes.
And Councilmember McClellan?
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Thank you very much, Angela. All right, that brings us to public comment. And again, there's still time for the public to submit their comments to the city's website if you'd like to get in on public comment. At this time, any person may address a matter within the jurisdiction of the City Council, Housing Authority, Successor Agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency that is not on the agenda. Comments relating to items on today's agenda are to be taken at the time the item is heard. State law prohibits discussion or action on items not on the agenda. However, City Council and Housing Authority members may briefly respond to statements or questions, and an item may be placed on a future agenda. Angela, did we receive any comments for public comment?
Yes, sir. We just received one comment, and it's from Mr. David Chenoweth. And he writes, my name is David Chenoweth, and El Cajon is my hometown. I make a practice of reading our city's publicly released SB 1421 documents posted on the city's website transparency page. These documents show clearly to any casual reader that El Cajon Police Department training program has failed us again and again for decades. Therefore, I have the following question, and this is a question for both Mayor Wells and City Manager Mitchell. What will you do in the next 90 days to ban the use of chokeholds, strange holds, and all forms of cardio restraint by the El Cajon Police Department and its members, to establish the requirement that every member of the El Cajon Police Department must declare a warning before discharging any weapon of any kind, to establish that all members of the El Cajon Police Department have a duty to intervene whenever another member of ECPD violates the law, ECPD policing or ECPD training, to ban discharging any weapon of any kind at moving vehicles, to require comprehensive reporting by the City of El Cajon of any and all use of force.
The 2019-20 budget, and then he'll present some preliminary figures for the 2020-21 general fund budget. I'll conclude today's presentation with presenting some policy discussion items as well as some balancing budget options for the 2021 budget, and then we'll be engaging the City Council for some feedback, which will help us prepare a budget for presentation at the June 23rd council meeting. Next slide. So this graph shows the number of positions that are currently funded by the general fund, as well as for the previous 14 years. This graph also breaks down staff by police, shown in blue, fire, shown in red, and then other or miscellaneous or non-public safety, shown in the green color. As you can see, that there was a ratcheting down of employees that were funded by the general fund as a reflection of the Great Recession. And so you can see in 2008 through 2012, there was a reduction in the number of staff. And you'll notice that number really hasn't crept back up. A lot of cities, as their budgets got better, staffing levels went back up to at least maybe not pre-recession, but somewhere in the middle of the recession before the heavy reaction. And we never did that. And you'll see how that's reflected in a second to your general fund reserves. I also want to point out over the last 15 years, our police department staff has declined by about 13%, and our non-safety staff has declined by 36%. So we're doing the same amount of stuff with just a lot more efficiencies, a lot less individuals doing that. I did want to note that you'll see a fluctuation of fire staff. It goes from 43 up to, I believe, up to 58 and then 61. Part of that is there was a period of time when the city was funding our paramedics through an enterprise fund that we were collecting money from paramedic transit. We no longer have that enterprise fund. So when that ended, those positions shifted to the general fund. So that explains why there's an increase in fire staff, although our number of fire employees has not increased during this period of time. Go to the next slide. This shows what we have in the general fund reserve as of right now. So you can see that we have about $49 million on our reserves, our general reserves, and they're split into different pots of money that help us kind of keep things order separated. We have one, you can see the area in blue, that's our 20% operating budget. And that's really your ultimate safety net. And if you really dip into that, there's some big problems going on. I would only anticipate ever using that in the event of massive earthquakes and we need to rebuild lots of infrastructure and there just isn't money anywhere else to go. But we do have some money set aside over the last few years for economic recovery, or an economic downturn, $6.5 million. And then whenever we have a surplus from year to year, we just kind of carry that over as unencumbered or undesignated reserves of $18.7 million. So that's kind of, in my mind, the money that we have as our discretion in our reserves. It feels good to be sitting at $49 million. It gives staff a lot of confidence in the event of a bad experience or a big sewer line break or something where cash is important to have. So, but I wanted to give you that context of how much we really have in our general fund reserve. I'm going to show the next slide. this shows actually the same thing, but over a period of 10 years. And as you can see, through a lot of fiscal discipline on the city council, and by not, and I made that reference to, we've kept our staffing levels flat. Because of that, we've been able to grow those reserves to where they are today. And as you can see, a lot of that reserve growth is in that green area, which is or the purple area, which is that economic recovery. So before I turn, that was some context. Before I turn it over to our finance director, any questions about just staffing levels generally or about the general fund reserve from the council?
No.
Okay. So I saw some head shakes. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Shane to talk about this current fiscal year projections and then forecast some things for next fiscal year. Mr. Shane?
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, distinguished members of the City Council. A lot of the information I have today represents more of an update than any new news, so I'll try to be brief and bring us to the issue of today. This first slide is a projection of our FY20 or current year general fund revenue. We're currently projecting just a tad over $75 million for the year. That is approximately $2.2 million under budget. If you'll notice the far right column, that the majority of our revenue categories have overperformed their budget. Very successful year in those regards. However, you can see the two negative numbers, which represents the two revenue categories that have been the hardest hit by the COVID-19 episode. Transient occupancy tax, or the hotel tax, is down, as one could anticipate with decreased travel. Sales tax is down most significantly. That's been our biggest problem. That number is a combination of two events, and this is where I'll share a little bit of new information. That is the combination of reflection of decreased economic activity that we're all aware of, but additionally, that number represents the effects of an executive order from the governor, which took place at the end of March, that permitted the deferral of sales tax. There's a number of conditions that affected different sized businesses, some of which could defer it to the end of July. Some of them could defer their sales tax for up to a year. The problem this has created for us is at the worst possible time for us monitoring this crucial revenue source, we've kind of gone dark a little bit on quality information on how to assess our condition. On the bright side, the effect of the deferral issue, this shouldn't impact the total revenue we collect over this year and next year together, but it will affect which year we receive it, whether it's the current year information or current year revenue or next year's revenue. So what it has done is made FY20, the current year, look a little worse, and it makes next year look a little bit better. And you will see that throughout the next few slides.
Mr. Shane, if I can interrupt really fast, we're having some technical difficulties with our broadcast right now. I'd recommend we just pause for a minute. Sorry to cut Mr. Shane off in the middle of mid-slide, but I think it's important that we probably pause. Let's get the IT fixed, and we'll come right back if that's okay with the council.
That's fine. Say give it 5 minutes.
Give us 5 minutes for recess. Thank you. Okay. City Council, you there? Looks like everyone's back. So, turns out our equipment's functioning. The server that we go through to broadcast, their equipment's not working. We can't reconnect. So we are currently on Facebook Live right now, and so we're redirecting our broadcast to that. The public should be aware that all of the recording up to this point will be on our recording. So if you go back and watch the video, you will be able to see the full council meeting. So I don't want to restart over the entire thing. I heard it kicked out during the presentation. So the only thing of substance of missing was public comment, which can be heard, and then the beginning of the budget staff report. If it's okay with the council, I'd recommend I just sort of introduce that budget staff report, and have Mr. Shane begin from where he started, because that's really the meat and potatoes of it. So is that okay with the council, or would you like us to go deeper? Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Okay, so as you recall, the purpose of this agenda item is really to be a continuation of last council meeting's discussion about the 5-year financial outlook, and then to preview next week or next council meeting's presentation, which hopefully will be the final budget for the city council to consider if you wish to adopt it at that time or at a subsequent meeting. So the staff report includes 2 graphs that I think are important for the public to pay attention to. One has to do with our staffing levels over the last 15 years. That graph will show that our staffing levels have remained pretty constant. In fact, we're probably looks like we're at about a 15-year low in terms of staffing levels. Also, our general fund reserve is very healthy right now, about $49 million. And the staff report includes the different pots that make up that general fund reserve balance. So with that, Mr. Shane, I turn the time back over to you to present where we're at this current fiscal year, and then some projections in the next fiscal year.
Good afternoon again. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. So to catch us up and update us on where we are today, set the stage for the next conversation. This slide is a projection or a summary of the FY20 general fund revenue for the current fiscal year, FY20. We're anticipating revenues to come in just a hair over $75 million. That's approximately $2.2 million under the budget. We've had strong performance in most revenue categories, with the exception of the 2 categories affected most by the COVID-19 crisis. Transient occupancy tax, or the hotel tax, is down, as one would expect. Most significantly are our sales taxes, which are down quite significantly, down approximately $3.6 million from budget. However, there's 2 big factors that are driving that decline, the first of which is a reflection of the reduction in economic activity as a result of this public health crisis. But additionally, there's a fairly significant adjustment in those numbers that's reflective of an executive order signed by the governor at the end of March, which gave many businesses in California the opportunity to defer their sales tax, in some cases to the end of July, in some cases as much as 12 months. Unfortunately, what that has done for us at this critical time where revenues are declining and we most need to monitor them, we've been negatively impacted by the quality of information we're receiving. However, we're at a point where we had to run with an estimate, and that estimate is reflected in these balances. What this has effectively done is reduce FY20 revenues and increased FY21 revenues for those deferrals. Theoretically, it should not affect the total sales tax we receive over that 2-year period, this year and next, but it will affect in which year we receive it. Moving our attention to the expenditure side of the equation, we anticipate expenditures to total $78.3 million at fiscal year end. That's approximately $600,000 under budget. When viewed alongside projected revenues, we're anticipating a year-end shortfall of approximately $3.3 million. Just a reminder, there isn't the impact of the deferrals in there, and a few other items that have taken place over the course of the fiscal year. Looking forward to next year, FY21, we anticipate revenues to total approximately $74.1 million. This is another $1 million approximately down from what we anticipate in FY20. Here again, it's not hard to see where this is most prominently felt, and that is in sales tax, which we're anticipating to be down approximately $2.4 million. And here again, that looks a little bit better than it really is because of the deferral situation. Before we get into numbers on the expenditure side, a couple of disclaimers. As a result of falling revenues, city management has taken multiple measures in trying to mitigate this impact. And included in the numbers you're going to see here in just a moment include a number of positions that we're anticipating holding vacant during the course of next fiscal year. We've included no new vehicle purchases for next year. A number of community events have been impacted, either reduction in scope or cancellation. We've used the Information Technology Fund balance to fund some one-time expenditures rather than using operating revenues. We've contracted with an outside service provider for landscape maintenance. We've suspended the apartment inspection program, and we've reduced staffing in the community development department. As a result, plugging those changes into our budget, we're currently sitting at a draft FY21 expenditure budget totaling approximately $77.6 million. This budget is approximately $1.3 million less than the FY20 budget. And when viewed alongside projected revenues for next year, it still leaves us with a budgetary shortfall of approximately $3.6 million. And that brings us to the discussion for today, which is a discussion of possible mitigation measures. And for that, I would like to hand back over to Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Shane. At the last council meeting, so I have some ideas that staff has. I've included some ideas that staff has developed. These are more policy options, as you saw. We are at about a $3.6 million deficit. As a reminder, that was at one point a little over $8 million. I had staff go back and by cutting budgets, by being creative and deferring different types of costs, we're able to get that down to that $3.5 million. But at this point, a lot of the other cuts that we could get to are bigger policy discussion items that we wanted to get the city council to weigh in on. So with that, we're going to present those items. Some of them I have a stronger recommendation than others. Some of them I'm actually not recommending at all, but I wanted to include them because it gives a sense of where we're at in terms of finding budget fixes. And then I turn the time over to the council to weigh in on some areas that they thought we should focus on, or areas that they would not want us to focus on. Based on that feedback, we'll then compile those concepts into our final budget, which we'll present at the next city council meeting. So at the last council meeting, we briefly talked about the idea of increasing revenue. And there's really a couple ways to do that. One is through economic development. We're always working on doing that, trying to attract new businesses. We've been pretty successful this past year in doing so. So we'll continue to do that. But that's not a real big fix for the budget. It has some incremental improvement, but you don't solve budget deficits with bringing in one business to the city. But we think there are some city-owned properties that have the opportunity to generate some lease or rental revenue. The Public Works Yard has some surplus space, and we think there's a way to put that out onto the market for some lease opportunities. And we also have some freeway frontage on the south side of the 8 that could potentially be used for an electronic billboard, which could generate revenue as well. City of Lemon Grove recently is working on that project. These concepts, although generate revenue, do take a while to find the right partners, construct, enter into lease agreements, go through the zoning process, which actually will take the majority of time. So theoretically, we won't see these benefits of these revenues until best case scenario about half year through the fiscal year. A while ago, staff presented this concept where some cities have reduced their requirement to go through a planning process because the council will eventually see these things anyway. And the council at the time felt that it was probably premature to do that. One way to expedite these revenues would be to actually waive the zoning requirements of the city, or at least going through the zoning process for approval for city projects, as long as these projects would then be reviewed by the city council through the lease program, and at that time, any zoning issues could be brought up. So I wanted to bring that forward to the city council's attention, that that is an option that the city council could do to help expedite revenues into the coffers. If we were to, if the council wanted to direct us to explore that, we would recommend a sunset clause on that, so it wouldn't be in perpetuity, but it would be during this fiscal emergency. While preparing this agenda report, management staff worked with our labor groups. I'm pleased to say that all 5 of our labor groups recognize the fiscal position that the city is in right now, and they have expressed a willingness to give up their next year's cost of living adjustments if that is needed by the city in order to help balance the budget. This concession would save, we estimate, up to about $700,000, but we would have to make this up over the term of the labor agreements, which we're in year 4 of a 5-year agreement right now. So we'd have to push those costs off to a later date. Another idea that's contemplated in the staff report is an idea of a voluntary furlough program. There are more and more organizations that are giving their employees more flexibility in terms of creating a life work balance. This would allow staff to take time off without compensation, without pay, more than they currently are allowed to, which would reduce our overall payroll expenses while giving employees the opportunity to take time off to do other things that they would want to do in exchange for not receiving compensation for that time. We think that, depending on how many people participate in that program, could save up to $200,000. One of the concepts that staff explored is a notion of browning out one of our 6 fire apparatuses that are currently in service. And the option that we are presenting in the staff report is to have one of those go unfilled once on an average of every 3 days. We think that this would save a little under $500,000, $425,000. And, but it's important to note that this would have an impact on our service delivery. If you look at our firefighter per capita, we're one of the lowest in the county. If you look at our call volume per engine company, we're one of the highest in the county. So to do this would be a dire measure, but I wanted the council to have this as an option for them to consider if they felt the need to do that. We also presented an idea of an early retirement program. We have a fair number of employees that are close to retirement that could potentially take advantage of this program. The city would offer a financial incentive to retire sooner than they had anticipated. And this program would save money by either not filling those positions, or in the case of public safety positions, which have to be filled, we would hire them at a lower, someone's retiring at top step, we would fill it at the lowest step, an A step, and there would be some savings realized by that program. Depending on how many people participate in the program would determine how much money that program would save. So we're looking for some feedback on that program. We think there's some value in doing that. Almost near the end of these ideas, a lot of our training that we pay for or that's reflected in our budget is actually reimbursed by the state of California. Specifically, a lot of our police department training is reimbursed by the state. So I wouldn't recommend reducing that training because there is reimbursement for that. But we do have a lot of conferences that staff attends, that the council attends. I would recommend that we curtail a lot of those conferences this next fiscal year. We will have a new council member this year. I would recommend that we have the new council member training that stay in the budget. But for the most part, anything that isn't either reimbursed or highly required, that we cut out of the travel and training budgets. For the last few years, the next program is for the last few years, the city's been reducing the CDBG participation or the CDBG funding in the crime-free multi-housing program. What this has done is it's really shifted costs back to the general fund. And so we're trying to understand the value of the program. The council could consider ending this program. That would shift more money back into CDBG programs. It would save about $50,000. But this is, as a reminder, this program is a program that helps link people that are living in apartment complexes with our police department. It's probably a pretty valuable program right now, and it helps our apartments raise the standard in those facilities. The next to last item that is listed in the staff report has to do with our concern that there are some care facilities that are taking advantage of the city's 911 system. We have evidence that a lot of our care facilities are calling 911 for non-emergency calls. There's a few that are heavy abusers of this program. We have tried to work with them to no avail. We think that if council gave us some direction to work on a fee where we would charge for superfluous calls or calls that were found to be non-emergency, this would either reimburse the city for costs, or it would actually help these companies change their business model and find other ways to fund their needs. If the council were to give us some direction on this, we would definitely work with the 10 care facilities in the city and help develop a program and a policy that they could live with, and then we would bring that program back to the city council for consideration. But we think that such a program would either reimburse the city up to $60,000 annually, or save the city $60,000 in expenses that we're currently incurring by going to superfluous calls. The last consideration for council is to rely on the general fund reserve balance to fill a portion or all of the shortfall that you see before you today. We think that there are sufficient funds for the strategy, but we would caution that this is not a source that can go back to year after year. And if this were to be utilized and the economy were to return, we'd recommend replenishing that fund as fast as we possibly could to get us back in a healthy situation. So those are staff's recommendations and some other ideas that we're presenting. We're looking for city council feedback on how you want us to proceed with finishing the budget. We look forward to hearing from your comments, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, I've got a comment for Mr. Mitchell. Can I jump in? Though I think you might be on mute, but.
We can hear you.
Thanks. Yeah. Feel free, Steve. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Shane, can you go back to the budget shortfalls at like 3.5 million that you're looking for next year? That one. Okay, so we're looking at 3.6 million to fill somehow. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you mentioned on an earlier slide you thought the deferral from this year would be made up in a following year. It sounds, if I heard that right, there's no loss of revenue due to temporary closures of business. Did I hear that right, or what do you anticipate will be actually loss of sales tax revenue?
That's already factored into these numbers. Sales tax in total fell off fairly significantly as a result of this. If I recall, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 to $7 million between the last little bit of FY20 and FY21 combined.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for now.
Gary, did you have a question?
Actually, I'll wait on this. I understand it all, but I'll just go through each item a little bit later.
Yeah. Graham, I wanted to ask about the labor group's offer to suspend their COLAs. How much does that change the picture?
That would save about $700,000. However, that dollar figure does drop a little bit depending on how many positions go unfilled. So if there's positions unfilled, we'll get the savings on that side. but we won't get it through the COLA. But so if we have some unexpected early retirements through a program, that may be a little bit less, but we're anticipating about $700,000 right now, roughly.
All right. And then limiting travel, how much did you expect to save from that?
We think that we could cut out, if we were to eliminate other travel, we could probably cut $120,000 out of the budget that way.
Okay. Go ahead, Gary.
Regarding the early retirement program, so does the city buy an annuity? Is that how it works? And
Well,
what would that be?
That would be one option. Probably the option that we would recommend would be that we would pay for health benefits for a period of time, depending on how quickly someone chose to retire early. And so that would be the financial incentive. We've done a survey of staff that are close to eligible to retire, and that seemed to be the option that was most preferred.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Angela, do we have any speaker cards for this item?
We have no cards, sir.
All right, well then I'll just bring it back to discussion amongst the city council, and Grant, what you're looking for is just really some direction on this, right? Grant,
Mr. Mayor, if there was an idea that you liked, that the council liked or didn't like, it'd be good to know that, because then we can reflect that on the budget. So, for example, if you really want us to focus on an early retirement program, we'll do that and work on that. If crime-free multi-housing doesn't make sense to eliminate right now, then we'll ignore that. So we're looking for that kind of direction. Almost a thumbs up, thumbs down on each of these measures would be useful to us.
I think the fee for the 9/11 abuse is a good idea if they're abusing it to that extent, because that costs us a lot of money to have them run out there every time they call 911.
Yeah, I would agree with Councilmember McClellan. The fee for 911 abuse, I'd like to see some kind of a program where we have some standards to put forth, some medical standards. So if they call for a lift assist, if they call 911 for a lift assist, or if someone fell, that's not a 911 emergency. And maybe we could get some contribution from skilled nursing facilities that have good standard operating procedures to kind of be the voice to say, hey, this is what we call for, just so we don't, I'd like to see some medical standards just so we're not caught in a, well, my opinion, this and that, tit for tat kind of thing.
Eric?
Yeah, I agree on the 911 abuse fee. I think that's important, and people shouldn't be using us when they don't have the proper equipment. There's actually equipment to lift people up and get them back on the bed.
Another thing would be the voluntary furlough program. I think it's an excellent idea, because without the interaction of the people with with the COVID-19 problems of social distancing and everything else, you probably don't need as many people, or maybe you could even have them work from home. Maybe that would save some money if they didn't have to travel back and forth. Maybe they could maybe reduce their hours a little bit.
Well, being a voluntary program, I don't see how that can hurt.
Right.
Could you go back to the slide that had the colored bar graphs on the different segments of the general fund reserve? Keep going back one there. So let's say we keep the 15.8 million at 20%, because we might need that for a good bond rating. For instance, if we go for pension obligation bonds, and we definitely want to keep that reserve for PERS obligation, because we know it's going to increase at least in a couple of years. So really, we've got the top two levels, which is 25.2 million, And that represents years of carryover and some economic uncertainty. So to me, that's kind of the pool that I'm working with, 25.2 million.
Yeah, I agree.
And then I come back to, okay, so let's go back to the slide with all the ideas on it. So 3.5 is where we stand now. And we're looking at ideas to either shrink that by increasing revenue or shrink that by reducing expenses. So here's my bullet point thoughts. Revenue opportunities, I like it. I like the concept of an electronic billboard. It might take a year to actually show some revenue, but it's a good long-term revenue producer. It allows us to advertise city events, which people say, I didn't know about it. And the Interstate 8 traffic is great. It could be right there. We've got some property right by the Kia at the Johnson Avenue exit. I like that idea. The employee concessions, I appreciate what the labor groups have done, but I don't think we should ask for the concessions from them. I might need to ask for next year, but I don't think we're there right now. We don't know how fast this recovery will be. So I'm going to vote no on concessions and keep the morale up, keep the people from fleeing to other jurisdictions, because the institutional knowledge of our city staff is tremendous. The fire staff, I'm not too keen on that for the reasons Mr. Mitchell said on per capita calls and things. My last interest really is the 911 abuse. Having gone on a ride along a couple of years ago, I personally witnessed an abuse of this. I believe it can account for as much as 10% of their total calls. It's absolutely a great idea.
All right, thank you, Steve.
I think the fire staff reduction, that might be a difficult thing to live with.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably not the place where we need to go right now. We're so busy with fire calls already.
I think my final takeaway was to take even 3.5 million out of a reserve of 25.2 million is not unreasonable at this point.
Well, Steve, I agree with everything you said. And I specifically don't think we should be asking the employee groups to give up their COLAs right now. And like you said, we may get there in a year or two. Hopefully not, but let's save that for a time when we're in more dire straits. Does everybody agree with that, or anybody have another thought?
Well, if they're willing to give it up, I think that we should ask for help from every place we can get it to get us through this period. And if they're willing to do that, well, I think that's on the back for them.
Any other thoughts?
Graham, I had a question about the employee concessions. Did I hear you say during the presentation that whatever concessions are made would have to be made up at the end of a year time frame? Did I hear that right? Or did Clay mention that?
Well, I mentioned that. So right now, the city doesn't have the authority to withhold cost of living adjustments. So because we're contractually bound to pay those. So the only way to not include them in this year's budget would be to negotiate something. I'll let you know that part of our pre-negotiations as part of this would be that there would be an expectation that those funds would be paid out over the period of the contract. Also, if the council were to pursue this, I would recommend, if revenues end up being far better or exceeding our expectations, that we make the employees whole as soon as possible. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
So we would be obligated to pay it. So essentially, we'd be kicking the can down the road and paying it later.
Correct.
Okay. I don't feel comfortable kicking the can down the road if they're. I'm not comfortable pulling the funding from them right now. I think we should. if they want to offer that down the road when we have a better idea of what this looks like economically with regard to a recession, then we could revisit it then, but I'm not comfortable doing that. The voluntary furlough program, I think Steve mentioned it, I think is a great idea. I'd be okay with training and travel, cutting that. And then, as everyone said, the revenue opportunities, leasing the space in the public works yard and this signage, it's a great idea, as well as the fee for 911 abuse, which we already discussed.
And Graham, the early retirement program is voluntary, right? I mean, we would be forcing people into that.
It is voluntary. Yeah.
So that if people want to do that, that seems like a good opportunity. All right. Well, Graham, I think you've kind of got the thoughts up from everybody. Did you need more definitive answers than that, or do you think?
No, I think that's helpful. These are kind of things around the edges. What I would recommend is that we implement the things that we can. When we present the budget in 2 weeks, it'll probably, for example, cutting out $120,000 probably won't be reflected in the budget, but it'll be something that we'll be pursuing, and hopefully we'll be able to implement through an early mid-year consideration. We are, the finance director and I have talked about probably bringing the budget back in October, because we'll have a better sense of really what the economy did towards the end of this fiscal year, and it'll help us project out next fiscal year. So I think we'll be revisiting the budget sooner than we would normally, and we would reflect those bigger changes in that budget. But based on what I heard, I think we'll pursue the things that were discussed today, and not pursue the ones that were not. So I think we have enough feedback.
The one thing I don't see is the cutting the cost of some of the events.
So we already included that as part of our budget cuts that we're presenting. So we're scaling back some of the events like Hunt Fest, 4th of July, for example, will be much smaller this year because we won't be doing the actual activity. We'll just be doing fireworks show. But we are recommending elimination of America on Main Street in 2021 next year. But we would like to add a very small event. We don't think it'll cost much, but it's associated with our zip code. So on September 2nd, so 90220, our zip code, we'd like to do something on that Sunday on September 2nd. So we're planning on something small for that, but America on Main Street is a very expensive event, and I think this is probably the year to forego it. Unless the numbers look better mid-year budget, then the council could reconsider that.
I mean, doesn't that kind of correspond also with the requirements of the governor of not having thousands of people together?
Well, hopefully by next year or May 2021, we will be over this. But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, we don't know if Haunt Fest can even happen based on where the state's at. So,
okay. So that's kind of in flux, but that's a possibility to save some money.
Correct.
As long as we don't get to a place where we say goodbye to these things forever, because I think it's a big part of who we are.
Agreed.
All right. Anybody else want to make some comments on this before the staff takes it back to work on it and bring it back to us next week?
I'm satisfied.
Okay, great. You don't need any kind of a vote on this, do you?
No, this is just some feedback and some direction. This is very helpful to us.
Really quick, I don't think anyone mentioned it, but I think we should keep the crime-free multi-housing program. I don't think anyone made a comment on that.
Oh, yeah, I agree with it. I think most people left it alone because it's obviously worth the money. Anybody disagree with that?
No, I agree with it.
Agree.
Phil, you're right on.
Thanks, Phil, for mentioning that, though. That's good. We shouldn't leave it out. Okay, well, we're going to move on to the next administrative report. And that's item 13 for the Coronavirus Relief Fund sub-grant with County of San Diego. And staff, please introduce this to us.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As you know, in March, Congress passed and the President signed the CARES Act, which basically distributed money from Washington to the states and from the states to the various counties. And in San Diego County was obviously the recipient of some of these funds. And the county decided to apportion those funds based upon the percentage of population of all the cities. That equates to about a $1.8 million CARES Act funds for El Cajon. So before the council today is the agreement between the city and the county authorizing the city manager to sign that agreement and use those funds. All the funds must be spent by September 30th, 2020. So the time frame is very short. Staff has some ideas on how to use these funds and seeks council's input and direction on same. Right now, we're proposing that we would use $100,000 to reimburse the city for its food program that was initiated a couple of months ago, plus another $100,000 to extend that program in the same manner that it's been operating. So that's $200,000. Another $100,000 would be allocated to cover any law enforcement activities directly related to COVID. Another $100,000 would be for telecommuting or telework enhancements. $75,000 for City Hall improvements to ensure ongoing social distancing to better serve the public in a more responsible way. However, the majority of these funds, staff is proposing almost $1.2 million for our own local economic stimulus program to assist small businesses. As you know, several of the tranches of funding that have come out of the federal government haven't really gone to where everybody was expecting them to go. We think this is an opportunity where we can change that and try and reach some of the local small businesses. So some of the ideas we have in this respect were to make funds available for businesses that have not yet received any stimulus money from any level of government, are not a franchise, subsidiary, or affiliate of a national company. Oftentimes, those businesses have support from the parent company. Focus on businesses that are sales tax generating businesses and businesses that employ local workers. So those are just some of the ideas that we're tossing around right now. And then we would hold back $200,000 as a reserve to continue to fund some of these other programs that I had mentioned, and of course the economic stimulus program. So at this time, staff is seeking some ideas and direction from the city council, and then direction to move forward with the establishment of these programs using the CARES money for them. And to that end, staff also recommends approval of the resolution, which authorizes the city manager to execute the agreement with the county. And with that, I'll address any questions.
I have a comment on that. Being an ex-automobile dealer, I know during these times when car sales are as they are, that the ongoing cost of flooring the inventory that they have on their lots can run anywhere from $30,000 to $80,000, $90,000 a month. And maybe if we had some businesses that needed a little help in paying some of those costs, it would keep them in business. We don't want to lose any of these car dealers. They're major sales tax generators in the city.
Well, I had an idea of a way that we could do this fairly. The hard part about all of this is going to be, how do you make good decisions about where the money should go? And frankly, if you make it some kind of a checkbox type situation where anybody who meets the criteria can get a check, we could be in a situation where we're giving checks of $50 because $1 million is a lot of money, but it doesn't go a lot of ways between a lot of people. My suggestion would be to put together a small group of people in the community, not political people, that would have 2 or 3 meetings where they would take applications, and maybe the staff could whittle those down to 100 or less, and they could decide who gets what based upon the need that they're reading about. I'm suggesting people that from the chamber, from some of the local service organizations, people like, I was thinking like Doug Williford, who was our former city manager, people who know the city very well. I'm open to suggestions, but I thought a group of 5 or 6 people that could meet and just make decisions based upon applications without a lot of heavy-handed criteria that cuts people in and cuts people out, and sometimes inadvertently makes bad decisions. What are thoughts?
I think that's a great idea. I know that the East County Chamber has been communicating with businesses that have been really down since COVID started, giving resources. So they're in real close communication, especially with businesses that are struggling, as well as the EDC. I know they've been receiving a lot of communication from businesses all over the region, and they've been counseling them on PPP loans and things like that. So I know that they're equipped and they have their ear to the ground. They've had their ear to the ground since this started. They know the business owners. So reaching out to them would probably be a good place to start with suggestions on criteria, or maybe even some additional people to put on this handful of people for the committee.
I like the idea, Bill.
Steve, any objections?
Well, I would include franchises. Sitting in an office right now of a franchisor, we have no funds to offer to our franchisees.
Well, I think that's I agree with you, and I think that's the great thing about, instead of having rules where you check a box and say, oh, well, I'm a franchise, so I don't qualify. You have a group of 5 or 7 local people that are looking out for everybody and can make human decisions based on that.
Yeah, I think the staff's thought is, if you are part of a large national corporation that has access to funds, that's different than a local family who owns a franchise.
Sure, the Home Depot is different than the Postal Annex.
Yes, and I think it's important for us to protect our revenue sources. I think, as you mentioned, Bill, we need to really look at these car dealers, hotels, people that generate the money that provide the services for El Cajon. The PPP loan essentially was 2 months of payroll, but there were a bunch of other costs that perhaps some of these businesses incurred that are not reimbursed for, that could put them on the edge of not being able to grow or rebound. Car dealers, as Bob mentioned, carrying expenses on inventory is not covered by a PPP loan.
That's right.
And so let's really focus on our sales tax generators. I'd also like to at least mention at this same time that we give an ear to women-owned and minority-owned businesses. This is the time in our society when we're saying we have a chance to press reset on how we normally look at things. And so maybe this is a group of people that should get an extra look, even if the grant is only $1,000. But let's make sure that we include everybody, not just the big sales tax generators, but those that perhaps got overlooked under normal channels.
I agree, Steve. Including minority-owned businesses. I know the Chaldean community is very large in El Cajon. And I think the chamber has been speaking to a lot of different minority-owned businesses, and they'd have some good ideas with regard to including community members or maybe even minority-owned business owners.
So, Vincent Graham, are you comfortable with that direction and putting that kind of a group together?
I think we have sufficient direction. I think we know the direction that the council would like us to go, so I would agree.
Great. So then you just need a motion for us to,
Yes, a motion to approve the resolution that would authorize the city manager to sign the agreement with the county.
somebody like to make that motion?
So move.
Second.
I think one is a second, one is a first. And I'll leave it to you, Angela.
Thank you, sir. And before I call for your vote, there are no comment cards for this item either. But Mayor Wells, your vote, please.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Council Member Goebel,
Yes.
Council Member Kendrick,
Yes.
and Council Member McClellan.
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Okay. There are no commission reports on today's agenda. Item 14 is my activities report and is as reported. Item 15 is a legislative report, and it is as reported. Vince, did you clarify anything on that, or?
No, not at this time. I will remind the council that we're starting to see some legislation be introduced that I would say strongly curtails the actions of police officers. I'll be including that in the report in future meetings, but it's something that council should be cognizant of.
Yeah, I think we'd really like to be kept very aware of all the direction of that. That's going to affect us very directly.
Absolutely.
Okay. Councilmember Kendrick, how about your report?
As stated.
Councilmember McClellan?
As stated.
Councilmember Goebel?
As reported.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz?
As reported.
There are no joint council member reports today. There are no general information items for discussion today. Item 20 is a first reading of an ordinance to introduce an urgency ordinance and standard ordinance to temporarily eliminate the need for a conditional use permit for sidewalk dining. And I will ask staff to tell us about this.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. You will recall that your last meeting in discussing the current situation related to the coronavirus and COVID-19 disease, that it coincided with the loosening of the County of Health Department orders to allow dine-in services by restaurants, provided that each complied with strict regulations to protect workers and customers. It was during that discussion that the council pointed out that many restaurants do not have adequate space to meet the county's requirements, allowing them to open for business for dine-in services. Without such services, many restaurants will face challenges in keeping adequate staffing for continued operations. The direction given to the city manager was to find a way and come back to the city council with a recommendation to assist these types of restaurants by temporarily allowing them to utilize space on the city's sidewalks or in the city's rights of way. The city manager, working with both the Public Works and Community Development departments, came up with at least one quick and easy solution, and that was to temporarily eliminate the need for conditional use permits as a condition for issuing an encroachment permit by the Public Works Department. By eliminating this requirement, applicants can more easily administratively process their application without the need of the involvement of the Planning Commission and City Council approval, including the time that's taken for necessary public hearings. It also eliminates the cost to pay for the notices, public hearings at both of these meetings, which will provide a further economic benefit to these businesses. Before you today are two ordinances drafted to temporarily eliminate the need for a CUP under Chapter 1209. The first is an urgency ordinance, which only requires adoption and reading by title and goes into effect immediately. The second follows our normal procedure for adopting an ordinance, and this one can be introduced today with the city clerk reading the title of the ordinance. Then it will be returned to you for second reading, adoption, and approval at your meeting in 2 weeks. That ordinance would then go into effect 30 days following adoption, which would make it effective July 23rd. I'm recommending that you approve both ordinances. And the reason is is that the urgency ordinance can take effect immediately and be applied to applications as early as tomorrow. Those that are making applications between now and the 23rd of July would not need to wait for that second ordinance to become effective. The second ordinance, which is arguably procedurally stronger, can then be adopted at your next meeting and eliminate the need for the urgency ordinance on the 23rd, on that date, the 23rd of July. While both ordinances make identical changes to Chapter 1209, the second ordinance includes a repealer clause to repeal the urgency ordinance so that no further action by the City Council will be necessary. I'm available to answer any questions you might have for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. Appreciate that. Any questions for Morgan on this?
Is there any way to do it so they can apply and start doing it right away? Is that
that's
what the ordinance?
We have the urgency. The urgency ordinance takes effect immediately. So if it's adopted by a 4/5 vote, then we can start the process. Now, staff will have to be ready for that, but at least it gives people the chance to move forward quickly.
Great.
And how fast can staff react to that?
I think what it will take is just simply a filing for an encroachment permit, and the Public Works Department really understands that process under Chapter 1209 already.
They can start tomorrow, Bob.
Okay. And why would we need the second ordinance? The first one be basically what they need to do in order to get started?
Well, the urgency ordinance is to take care of a threatened public health and safety concern. Once that goes away, we lose the urgency, so to speak. But also from a procedural standpoint, it makes it a stronger ordinance because by the time the urgency ordinance runs its course for the first 45 days, the new ordinance will take effect and repeal that one and continue on until the end of the year.
Okay.
All right, Angela, do we have any speaker cards for this item?
No comments were received, sir.
All right, this seems like a great idea. I don't see any objections to it. Any questions or thoughts?
I think it's a great creative solution from the city attorney's office.
Yeah.
Morgan, can we make a one motion for both, or do you need two separate motions?
I'd actually like two separate motions because we're going to have two separate ordinances, please.
Okay, then on the first motion, would somebody like to make a motion?
Move for the ordinance, the urgency ordinance.
Second.
Moved and seconded?
Mayor Wells, your vote, please.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz?
Yes.
Council Member Goebel?
Yes.
Council Member Kendrick?
Yes.
And Council Member McClellan?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And with your permission, I will read the title. It's an urgency ordinance of the City Council for the City of El Cajon, California, amending sections 12.09.030 and 12.09.060 of the El Cajon Municipal Code to temporarily eliminate the need for a conditional use permit for sidewalk dining in the city.
Okay, now there's a second part of the ordinance. Would somebody like to make a motion on that?
Move adoption.
Second.
It's actually introduction, but we understand.
Introduction, yeah.
Thank you. Mayor Wells, your vote.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz.
Yes.
Council Member Goebel.
Yes.
Council Member Kendrick.
Yes.
And Council Member McClellan.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And the title for that ordinance is an ordinance of the City Council for the City of El Cajon, California, amending sections 12.09.030 and 12.09.060 of the El Cajon Municipal Code to temporarily eliminate the need for a conditional use permit for sidewalk dining in the city. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, there is no reading of second ordinances. We are now at closed session, and I'd like to ask our city attorney to recite the title and lead us into closed session.
Thank you. The mayor and city council are going to be moving into closed session on two items. The first is a closed session for the public employee performance evaluation of the city manager. The second is a closed session for conference with legal counsel on anticipated litigation pursuant to paragraph 4 of subdivision D of Government Code section 54956.9, one potential case. The meeting will be held telephonically, and we will return to the live Facebook meeting once we've concluded.
All right. I'll make a motion to adjourn the closed session. Do I have a second?
Second.
Angela?
Mayor Welzer vote.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz.
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel.
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick.
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan.
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go to closed session. We'll be back very quickly. And back. Morgan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have our city attorney report on the items that happened in the closed session.
Thank you, Mayor Wells. City Council met in closed session on two items, items 21 and 22. The first was the public employee performance evaluation of the city manager, and the evaluation was conducted, and there's nothing to report other than it was performed. In item 22, it was a conference with legal counsel on anticipated litigation, and as described in the agenda, and direction was given to the city's legal counsel. And that concludes the reporting.
All right. This brings us to adjournment, the regular joint meeting of the El Cajon City Council, El Cajon Housing Authority, successor agency to the redevelopment agency. Let's do this right here. There we go. To the El Cajon redevelopment agency held this 9th day of June 2020 is adjourned until Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020 at 3:00 p.m. Thank you.
Okay.